Chicago. In Oregon, Governor Kate Brown said the move toward reopening her state would be a cautious and incremental one, guided by data on transmission of the coronavirus, availability of personal protective equipment and testing capacity, among other factors.
Gov. J.B. Pritzker of Illinois said he has begun reaching out to leaders of other Midwestern states to form a regional coalition to help make decisions on opening businesses and schools when the time comes.
In Mississippi, where a statewide shelter-in-place order is set to expire on Monday, Governor Tate Reeves said parts of the state could soon prepare to see other restrictions lifted.
The nation's governors and mayors on Tuesday proceeded with their own plans for how communities will reopen public life, in many cases pointedly ignoring President Trump's declaration that he alone has the authority to decide when to open up the states.
Just as the governors were the ones who shut the country down, they will be the ones to decide when to open it, they indicated.
He might want to read the Constitution, Mr. Pritzker, a Democrat, said of Mr. Trump.
In many parts of the country, governors from both parties said they were a long way off from telling Americans to go back to work and to their normal lives, but they also said it was not too early to make plans for that eventuality.
We have some very difficult days and weeks ahead, said Governor Charlie Baker of Massachusetts, a Republican.
Governor Gavin Newsom of California avoided providing any timeline, but he offered a glimpse of what his state's new normal would be like. Face coverings are likely to be a feature of public life, at least for a time. Patrons of restaurants are likely to have their temperatures taken before being seated and will be served by someone in a mask and gloves. Menus might be disposable.
Normal it will not be, Mr. Newsom, a Democrat, said. At least until we have herd immunity and a vaccine.
Across the country, governors who have gained both visibility and stature during the coronavirus outbreak, coordinating their state's responses and often holding televised daily news conferences, were unwilling to cede the new platforms and responsibility they built in recent weeks.
Governor Andrew M. Cuomo of New York began Tuesday by heaping scorn on Mr. Trump. "We don't have a king, we have a president," he said in one television interview, before quoting Alexander Hamilton and then adopting what could perhaps count as a more conciliatory approach.
"I'm not going to allow anything bad to happen to the people I represent," Mr. Cuomo, a Democrat, added. "I see my job very clearly. I get hired by the people of the state of New York to fight for them and to protect them."
Some governors, particularly Republicans loyal to Mr. Trump, said they believed that governors would certainly act in concert with the president. Late Tuesday, a day after Mr. Trump asserted that he had total authority to reopen the American economy himself, he sounded more cooperative.
Mr. Trump suggested at a news conference that some states would be ready to open soon, and said that he would be speaking to all of the nation's governors and would be authorizing each individual governor of each individual state to implement a reopening at an appropriate time.
Earlier in the day, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida said he thought states would follow the White House's guidance as they decided when to reopen.
"What's going to happen is, you're going to have people move in that direction," Mr. DeSantis, a Republican, said. "You're going to see states inevitably follow, because one or two states does it, the other states are kind of going to be at a disadvantage."
On Tuesday night, Governor Mike Dunleavy of Alaska said that he was ready to begin opening parts of his state's economy, and that he would watch for any signs of a significant rise beyond the state's 285 known cases. He announced that he was going to start with health care organizations, allowing them to carry out elective surgeries once again. Mr. Dunleavy mentioned retail as a sector he was looking to reopen.
Mr. Dunleavy, a Republican, said his decision was based in part on the stability of the state's known infection numbers and supplies of personal protective equipment.
In Pennsylvania, as in other states, political leaders are in disagreement about the timeline for reopening. Some Republican lawmakers are considering legislation that would reopen certain businesses, while the state's health secretary has warned that would be premature, and has spoken instead of a more gradual opening, perhaps county by county.
The state's Democratic governor, Tom Wolf, said on Tuesday he was in discussions with lawmakers of both parties about reopening plans and on Monday joined several governors of Northeast states to announce they were considering the question regionally. But the governor was firm on who did not have that power, the president.
We had the responsibility for closing states down, essentially, Mr. Wolf said, referring to other governors wrestling with the matter. We also have the responsibility, the feet on the ground here, the people who know best what's going on in our state, to figure out how we're going to reopen.
The plans in the Northeast will be developed by an improvised think tank-like team with 3 representatives, the chief of staff, an economic development expert and a health expert, from each state. The governors who formed the coalition, which also includes Connecticut, Delaware, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York and Rhode Island, said the group would create a fully integrated regional framework, while weighing economic, scientific and social data.
From the beginning, there has been no central playbook for how to handle the coronavirus in the United States.
Some states, like California, shut down early and entirely. Others, like Florida and Texas, issued piecemeal orders for residents to stay home, first at the city and county level, and later statewide. A small number of more rural states, including Arkansas, Iowa, Nebraska, North Dakota and South Dakota, have yet to adopt stay-at-home orders, deciding instead to close businesses and appeal to residents' judgment.
It is possible that the reopening of America could be just as ad hoc.
One model by the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington, which has been cited by the White House, predicts that states that were slower to adopt the most stringent social distancing orders will see the worst of the crisis last through the beginning of June, a month longer than states that took early action.
We're seeing right now 2 different Americas, said Ali Mokdad, a public health expert at the University of Washington who worked on forecasting. When we talk as a country about needing to go back to business, certain states are ready theoretically as of May, but many aren't as of June.
As long as the virus is active anywhere, he said, there will be risks. We are a mobile society and we travel a lot, he said. That's the problem.
Even as governors on the nation's coasts eyed unified plans for reopening, local officials in the middle of the country were batting back a series of crises, from the threat of a surge in new cases to the risks of financial collapse.
Life is completely upended, said Mayor Brian Barnett of Rochester Hills, Mich., in suburban Detroit, which has been hit hard by the virus. Our economy has been brought to a screeching halt. Our budget faces immediate gaping holes.
Mayors including Mr. Barnett, the president of the United States Conference of Mayors, on Tuesday called on the federal government to offer financial relief to small and mid-size cities and bring local leaders into the fold when discussing when and how to reopen the economy.
In some cases, the discussion about whether to reopen has arrived even before a full shutdown came. People are ready to go back to work, restaurants open, said Mayor Michael R. Brown of Grand Forks, ND, which has had 11 confirmed cases. We have to say, this is early in the game. There is a calm before the storm.
Some Republican governors said they would gradually get their people back to work, but only with the guidance and collaboration of the White House.
Governor Greg Abbott of Texas has provided few details about his plan, but he has said that he wants a staggered approach, in which businesses that have a minimal impact on the spread of the coronavirus open first and other businesses follow.
Mr. Abbott, a Republican, said he had spoken over the weekend with Mr. Trump and Vice President Mike Pence about his plan to reopen businesses.
This is all done in collaboration, Mr. Abbott said, of working with the federal government.
In Colorado, which has reported more than 300 deaths, Governor Jared Polis has already extended a statewide stay-at-home order once, to late April. As that date draws closer, state officials and public health teams are tracking numbers on the pace of new cases, deaths and hospital discharges to understand the trajectory of the virus. State health officials said on Tuesday they were seeing the growth of new cases slowing, perhaps even starting to plateau, and were now trying to model scenarios about how infections and hospital resources would be affected by easing the state's orders to stay home.
At a briefing on Monday, Mr. Polis, a Democrat, said the state would be guided by the data as it determines how and when to restart public life.
Folks will know exactly what's going and what's not, Mr. Polis said. It doesn't mean that bars will be open or restaurants will be full. There's a number of additional social distancing things that we'll need to do. As a whole, we need to find a way where people are able to support themselves and go about their lives in a more normal way.
In West Virginia, Governor Jim Justice, a Republican, said that he believed that Mr. Trump was a great president that's under unbelievable pressure, but that he did not know what to make of the president's statement that he controlled the states.
The governor offered no time frame for changes to statewide orders.
I don't want to send everyone out dancing in the streets quite yet, he said. He added later, without any question whatsoever, we won't do anything if we think or the experts are telling me that it is going to endanger us.
In Washington state, where an early outbreak took place, Governor Jay Inslee, a Democrat, said on Tuesday that the president's remarks had been dangerous.
What went through my mind is, you can't make this stuff up, Mr. Inslee said. No one with even the most basic understanding in our middle schools thinks that we have a royalty situation where someone is vested with such a high degree of wisdom that they can countermand the duly elected governors.
Reporting was contributed by Thomas Fuller in San Francisco, Alan Blinder and Rick Rojas in Atlanta, Patricia Motse in Miami, Sarah Mervosh in Canton, Ohio, Mike Baker in Seattle, Jack Healy in Boulder, Colorado, Manny Fernandez in Houston, Campbell Robertson in Pittsburgh, and Adil Hassan and Vanessa Swales in New York.